This is our Beyond the Border project, and we're gonna be using watercolor. With watercolor, if I'm gonna be using a lot of watercolor and covering a lot of the paper and using a lot of water, I would stretch this paper out, which just means to tape it down onto a board like this. I would hover over it and I'd tape it down. But for this project, I'm not using just a whole lot of watercolor, and I'm not covering a whole lot of the paper, so I think it's gonna be okay, and I don't think it's going to warp and wrinkle up too much. So I'm going to put this to the side for now, and I'm going to not stretch it, not tape it down onto a board. It's gonna save me some time, save me some tape, and I think this project will be fine. Once I have clean water from my clean tub in each of these spots, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to load my water. And so I have dirty water, I have my clean water, and then I have my colors. For this particular car, I think I'm going to make the top of this car green. So I'm just going to start putting water into this green. Remember, with watercolor, you never work straight from the paint cake. You want to always load a puddle of water. This is going to allow your water to be smooth and have a nice transition. Also, I like to create two different amounts of water. Oh no, I've already made my clean water dirty. Don't do that. If you're going to clean your brush, always clean it in the dirty water first, then get from the clean water. Okay, now I have a more pigmented green and I have a less pigmented green. I like to work this way because I want to have similar colors, but slightly lighter and then slightly darker. Always work back from this puddle. Don't ever dip back into the paint cake. When I'm working, you always want to use more water than you think you're going to need, and you're going to want to make it lighter than you think. You can always come back and add a second layer, and matter of fact, in all of this that you see here, I am going to add a second layer, and it's going to make it darker. So you can see here where the blue already was, it's making my car darker. And some of that blue I'm gonna allow to show through, just solid blue. And then some of it I'm coming over with my green color. Now, when I'm working, I want to always continue to work where it's wet and pull that out. If I start to get a puddle like I just did, make sure to work that puddle out. I'm going around certain parts that I wanna leave completely brown, like this, and certain parts that I want to leave completely blue. But other parts, I'm adding a second layer, which is also very transparent. I can see I have a puddle here. Don't leave your puddle there. I want to kind of spread that out. If you leave a puddle, it's going to dry differently with a different amount of pigment than everywhere else. To be able to get this smooth transition, I want to have it to be very watered down and very light everywhere. I don't want to let it dry in a spot that I'm going to come back to. So right here, if I'm going to come back and touch it with a color, I want to make sure that it's still wet. And then the opposite is true if I'm switching colors. If I'm going to come back with maybe a red or a gray or a black, I want to make sure to give it more than enough time to dry, more than you think. And so probably 15 minutes for this to dry, so that as soon as that black touches wet green, it's just gonna spread, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, if I was going to get clean water, I need to wash off in dirty, wash off in clean, and then get a different color. Ready to finally change colors. So I'm gonna wash off in the dirty water, wash off in the clean water, create a separate puddle. For this next puddle, I'm going to be doing some gray. Now, I'm going to be doing black in here eventually, but I'm gonna do gray first. So I'm going to make a very light, watered down black. So I'm taking the black and I'm watering it down a lot. If you water down black, it makes gray. If you want a color to be lighter, you don't add white, you just simply add more water and the white paper will show through. I gotta be really careful where this is still wet, so I'm gonna come back to this section, because if I was to touch any of this here, it's just gonna spread like crazy. If you're going to leave something white, like a reflection on a wheel or something like that, you've really got to plan ahead. You got to think about that and make sure that you leave that and not paint on it, and be very careful when you're going around it. Once again, I want to paint this and connect this sky before this paint dries. So you're working not super quick because you don't want to mess up, but I am working decently quick. And I'm also getting more paint from the puddle of paint, not from the paint cake. I'm not remixing this sky color. If you have harsh drawing lines here, you can leave them if you want, some artists do. But if you're going to erase them, you do need to erase them before you start watercoloring. Make those lighter. It does make it a lot more difficult to erase after you've watercolored on top. It kind of locks in that graphite pencil. So do think about that before you start painting.